Matthew Cruz was deep in thought. His company's sales were plummeting, and investors were growing more restless by the day. To make matters worse, the most important business dinner of his career was the following evening, and he needed to show up with the perfect fiancée. The problem was that he didn't have anyone. Frustrated, irritated, and hungry late at night, Matthew decided to order a pizza from Domino's to distract himself from the chaos in his mind. When the delivery arrived, it was Emma Sinclair, a young delivery driver wearing a worn-out jacket and sporting a tired but genuine smile. "You're late," Matthew snapped impatiently. "Well, maybe if your mansion wasn't so big, I could have found the door faster," Emma replied with a cheeky smile as she handed over the pizza. Matthew raised an eyebrow, unused to people talking back to him. He paid for the order, but Emma's uncommon beauty and confident demeanor caught his attention. As she turned to leave, Matthew stopped her. "Wait, is there a problem?" she asked, turning back. "What's your name?" Matthew asked, frowning as if piecing together a puzzle. "Emma." "Why?" she replied, crossing her arms suspiciously. Matthew took a deep breath. An absurd but possibly brilliant idea was forming in his mind. "Emma, I need a favor." "A favor?" Emma frowned. "Look, my job is to deliver pizzas, not do favors for weird millionaires." Matthew let out a rare chuckle. "It's a job," he clarified. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." Emma blinked in disbelief. "What?" "You heard me. I need a fake fiancée for a business dinner tomorrow night. It's urgent, and you're exactly what I need." She started laughing, but stopped when she realized he wasn't joking. "You're insane." "I'm not." Matthew pulled out his wallet and flashed a stack of cash. "I'll pay you well." Emma looked at the money, then at Matthew. Her rent was overdue, her debts were piling up, and she needed the money desperately. "How much?" she asked hesitantly. Matthew smirked. "Enough to change your life." After a moment of hesitation, she sighed. "Fine, but if this goes wrong, I'm charging double." Later that night, after finishing her shift, Emma was still trying to process how her evening had taken such a bizarre turn. From delivering pizzas to now being prepared to pose as a millionaire's fiancée, her life felt surreal. Matthew Cruz, with his serious and arrogant demeanor, seemed convinced this was a practical solution. To her, it seemed like a massive mess. "The dinner is tomorrow night," Matthew said as he descended the marble stairs of his mansion. "I have less than 24 hours to make you look presentable." "Presentable?" Emma raised an eyebrow as she followed him. "You hired me to play fiancé, not become your doll. I'm only doing this because I need the money. Don't expect me to turn into an actress overnight." Matthew stopped at the foot of the stairs and turned to her, surprised by her attitude. Then, shaking his head, he gave a slight smile. "You don't need to act. Just smile and talk as little as possible. They don't need to know much about you, just that we're engaged." "Engaged?" Emma laughed, crossing her arms. Funny hearing that from someone who clearly doesn't know the meaning of the word. Matthew ignored her comment and kept walking across the polished floor. Before Emma could argue further, a tall, elegant woman entered carrying shopping bags. "Mr. Cruz, I brought the pieces you requested," the woman said, shooting Emma a quick glance, her judgment barely hidden. "We'll need alterations," she remarked, her tone slightly disdainful. Emma crossed her arms, undeterred. "Listen, fancy pants. You may be rich, but if you think you're going to turn me into someone else, you're mistaken." Matthew sighed, visibly losing patience. "Do your best, Olivia. We don't have much time." Before Emma could protest, she was whisked away to an upstairs room. The next few hours were a whirlwind of dresses, shoes, and instructions. Emma couldn't understand how wealthy women put up with such things. When it was all over, she barely recognized herself. The mirror reflected an elegant woman, but the feeling of being out of place was overwhelming. Back downstairs, Matthew was waiting near the fireplace. When he saw her, he paused for a moment, his eyes scanning every detail. "This will work," he finally said with the detached tone of someone approving a project. "Wow, thanks," Emma replied, her sarcasm sharp. "I love being made to feel like a brand new chair." Matthew didn't respond, only smiled slightly. "Let me ask you something." She leaned forward a bit. "Why didn't you just hire someone from one of those agencies? I know they exist for stuff like this." Matthew hesitated, a rare occurrence for someone who always seemed so composed. "Because I need something genuine," he finally said, meeting her gaze with seriousness. "My rival will be at the dinner, and he's the kind of person who digs into everything. If I showed up with someone who seemed rehearsed, he'd figure it out immediately. And you think I'm genuine? You have personality," he said, surprising her. "That's hard to fake." Emma stayed silent, processing his words. It still felt like madness to her. The restaurant was nothing short of breathtaking. Sparkling chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over tables adorned with flawless floral arrangements. The patrons looked like they had stepped out of fashion magazines. Emma hesitated for a moment, feeling out of place, but Matthew offered his arm. Reluctantly, she took it, and he led her to a table where several men and women were already waiting. As they approached, Matthew was greeted with warm smiles and firm handshakes. "Matthew, great to see you," said an older man, gripping his hand. "And this must be your fiancée." Emma smiled, doing her best to mask her nerves. "Emma Sinclair, it's a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure is ours," the man replied, glancing at her briefly before turning back to Matthew. "You never fail to surprise us." They all sat down, and the conversation quickly turned to business. Emma stayed quiet, listening and observing, but one of the men eventually turned to her. "And you, Emma, what do you do?" She swallowed hard, glancing at Matthew, who offered no help. "I work in deliveries," she said honestly, then added, "but I'm planning to start my own business soon." The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Before he could press further, Matthew intervened. "Emma has an inspiring vision for the future," he said firmly. "It reminds me of why I started my company in the first place." His tone ended the conversation, but Emma could tell not everyone at the table was convinced. She kept her composure, answering politely when addressed. When the dinner finally ended, Matthew guided her back to the car. The silence between them felt heavier than before. "So," Emma said, breaking the quiet, "how did I do?" Matthew took a moment before replying. "It was acceptable." "Acceptable," she huffed. "Considering I was thrown into this with zero preparation, I think I did way better than acceptable." He gave her a faint smile. "Maybe. But that was just the beginning." Emma frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Matthew looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. "This charade will need to last longer than one night." Her heart sank. "What are you saying?" "The deal I'm trying to close requires long-term trust. These people aren't just looking at numbers. They want consistency. Something solid." Emma crossed her arms, frustration rising. "So this engagement thing, how long are we talking?" "Weeks. Months." "Yes," he said bluntly. "If it doesn't feel real, everything could fall apart. And you think I can pull this off? Pretending to be your fiancé for that long?" "I don't have another choice," Matthew admitted, still not meeting her eyes. When they returned to the mansion, Emma went straight to her room without another word. Sitting on the bed, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The elegant dress and flawless makeup were still there, but she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The next morning, the tension lingered. Matthew was already in his office when Emma came downstairs. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as Olivia, the woman who seemed to manage everything in Matthew's world, approached with a polite smile. "Good morning, Miss Sinclair. Mr. Cruz asked me to prepare breakfast for you." "Right. Thank you," Emma said, feeling awkward amid the formality. As she ate, Matthew appeared, impeccably dressed as always, though his face hinted at exhaustion. "I hope you got some rest," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "We have more to do today." "More? What else could you possibly want from me?" Emma set down her utensils, her frustration bubbling over. "There's an event this weekend. We need to be ready." "Another event?" Emma shook her head, exasperated. "I thought this would be over quickly." "I made it clear last night that it wouldn't be," Matthew said, his tone calm but firm. "You really think you control everything, don't you?" She shot back, glaring at him. "It's not about control, Emma. It's about survival." His words gave her pause. For the first time, she saw something deeper in him, vulnerability. "Survival?" she asked, her tone softening. Matthew looked away, seemingly debating how much to share. "My company is in a delicate position. These investors can either save it or destroy it. If I fail, everything I've built will be gone." The sincerity in his voice made her reconsider her irritation. For all his arrogance, Matthew wasn't as invincible as he seemed. "What exactly do you need me to do at this next event?" she asked, trying to sound practical. "Just keep doing what you did at the dinner," Matthew replied. "Be polite, confident, and most importantly, convincing. These people are like sharks. If they sense even a hint of weakness, they'll attack." Emma smirked faintly. "Sharks, huh? And what does that make you, Matthew? A goldfish?" He stared at her for a moment before smiling, a rare sight. "Maybe a bigger shark." The rest of the day was spent on rehearsals and adjustments as Emma prepared herself for the next stage of Matthew's high-stakes performance. Olivia spent hours bringing more outfits for Emma and explaining the etiquette rules she needed to follow. Although reluctant at first, Emma realized she was improving at playing the role Matthew needed. There was something oddly therapeutic about learning to move, speak, and behave like someone who belonged in that world. By the end of the day, Emma found herself sitting in the garden, enjoying a rare moment of peace when Matthew appeared. He seemed more relaxed than usual, though still carrying the weight of someone who could never fully let go. "You're starting to adapt," he said, sitting beside her. "I guess it's the least I can do, considering what you're paying me," Emma replied, trying to lighten the mood. Matthew smiled briefly, but his gaze quickly turned distant. "Thank you for agreeing to this, Emma. I know it's not easy." His unexpected sincerity made him seem more human, less distant. Emma felt a wave of empathy, but she quickly pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to forget this was just a job, a temporary facade. "I just hope this works," she said, gazing out at the horizon. Matthew nodded, and the silence between them felt more comfortable. They both knew the challenges ahead would be even greater, but for now, the moment felt like a rare reprieve from the chaos. The next morning, Emma woke up with a strange sense of restlessness. Sunlight streamed through the large bedroom windows, illuminating the meticulously decorated furniture. Even after days in the mansion, she still felt out of place. She didn't belong in that world, and the role she was playing seemed heavier by the day. But there was something else that unsettled her. Matthew Cruz. The man was an enigma, and she knew there was far more behind his facade of control. As she descended the stairs, she found Matthew in the living room, on the phone. His voice was steady and low as he gave instructions. Noticing her presence, he ended the call and turned to face her. "Good morning. I hope you're ready for a busy day," he said in his usual straightforward tone. Emma raised an eyebrow. Did I have a choice? He ignored her remark, walking over to a table cluttered with papers. "Tomorrow's event will be more challenging than the dinner. It's not just about smiling and nodding. These people will want to know you. They'll test you. We need to make sure you're prepared." Emma sighed, settling into a nearby chair. "Why does it feel like I've become the centerpiece of your plan?" Matthew gave a faint smile, but remained serious. "Because you have—" Before she could respond, Olivia entered the room, carrying more dresses and looking slightly rushed. "Mr. Cruz, I brought the final pieces for adjustments." "She needs to look perfect for tomorrow," Olivia said, her tone all business. "Perfect?" Emma muttered, rolling her eyes. "I think I've heard that word more this week than in my entire life." Matthew gestured for Olivia to proceed, and once again, Emma was whisked upstairs to try on dresses and shoes. Every detail was meticulously planned. The chosen dress for the event was elegant yet understated, designed to convey sophistication without appearing unapproachable. When Emma returned to the living room, Matthew was reviewing a list on his tablet. He glanced up, quickly assessing her outfit. "Better," he said. "Now we need to work on your posture and how you present yourself." "My posture..." Emma crossed her arms, visibly annoyed. "What else do you want to change?" "My breathing..." Matthew sidestepped closer. "If you want this to work, you need to accept that every detail matters." She rolled her eyes, but knew he was right. As much as she hated admitting it, Matthew's perfectionism made sense. Any mistake she made wouldn't just affect him, it would reflect on her as well. They spent hours rehearsing, Matthew simulating scenarios she might face at the event while Emma did her best to keep up. At first, she stumbled, hesitating or tripping over her words, but gradually, she began to feel more at ease. Despite his rigid demeanor, Matthew guided her patiently, offering corrections and encouragement when needed. Later that evening, as they took a break, Matthew surprised her by bringing over 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her and sat beside her on the couch. "You're improving," he said, studying his glass. "Thanks, I think," Emma offered a small smile. The silence that followed felt less tense than she had expected. For the first time, Matthew didn't seem to be analyzing her every move or word. "Can I ask you something?" Emma broke the silence. Matthew looked at her, intrigued. "Depends on the question. Why are you really doing all this?" she asked. "I know it's to save your company, but it feels like there's more to it." He remained silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he let out a sigh. "My company is all I have. I've worked my entire life to build it. I can't lose it. Isn't there anyone who can help? Family, friends?" Emma asked gently. Matthew shook his head. "My family is distant, to put it mildly, and friends are hard to keep in this world." There was a hint of sadness in his voice that he rarely let show. Behind his controlled exterior, Matthew seemed like a lonely man, perhaps even more lost than she had imagined. "You're not so different from me," Emma said, without thinking. Matthew raised an eyebrow, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You're also trying to fit into a role. The only difference is yours is permanent." Matthew didn't respond, but the intensity in his gaze suggested her words had struck a chord. The next day, the atmosphere in the mansion was even more tense. Olivia was constantly on the move, ensuring everything was perfect for the event. Emma, though nervous, felt more prepared. She had spent the previous evening mentally reviewing everything she'd learned, determined not to make any mistakes. When it was finally time to leave, Emma felt the weight of the situation press down on her once again. This wasn't just about playing a role anymore. It was about survival for both of them. Matthew appeared in the foyer, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that only added to his commanding presence. He extended his hand to Emma, who hesitated for a moment before accepting it. "Ready?" he asked, his smile subtle yet expectant. "Not really, but let's pretend I am," she replied, mirroring his smile. As they drove to the event, Emma couldn't help but glance at Matthew. Despite how complicated dealing with him was, there was something she was beginning to admire. His unwavering determination, his ability to stay calm under pressure. He wasn't perfect, but he certainly wasn't the cold-hearted man she had imagined him to be. "You know, you're not as bad as you seem," she said, breaking the silence. Matthew looked at her, surprised by her candidness, before offering a faint smile. I'll take that as a compliment. When they arrived at the venue, Emma took a deep breath and adjusted her dress. She was about to step back into a world that wasn't hers, but this time, she felt stronger. Matteo offered his arm, and she accepted, fully aware that this next step would be crucial. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the space, their light bouncing off mirrored walls adorned with gold accents. Emma walked beside Matteo, aware of the many eyes that turned toward them. Every movement felt deliberate, every smile measured. The weight of the moment was palpable, but she stood tall, determined to appear as confident as Matteo. "Remember, just follow my lead," he whispered, his voice firm and low. "Don't get too involved." She nodded, keeping the practiced smile on her face. Matteo guided her through the crowd, greeting guests with his usual composure. He seemed entirely at ease in this world, as if he'd been born to belong here. For Emma, it felt like stepping into uncharted territory, but her pride wouldn't allow her to show any sign of insecurity. Soon, they reached a small group where William Harrow stood at the center of attention. Emma immediately recognized the name, recalling the hours she'd spent rehearsing how to handle his presence. William was a middle-aged man with neatly combed gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. "Matteo," William exclaimed, offering a polite but commanding smile. "What a pleasure to see you here." "The pleasure's mine," Matteo replied, shaking the man's hand firmly. "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Emma." Emma extended her hand, keeping the serene expression she had practiced. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Harrow." "The pleasure's mine, my dear." "Matthew's told me a lot about you," William said, his smile widening. But there was something in his gaze that made Emma feel on edge. His next words carried an air of curiosity, as if he were testing Emma's intentions. He asked subtle questions about how she and Matteo had met, and Emma answered calmly, sticking to the script they had prepared. Matteo watched closely, ready to step in if needed. So far, Emma was handling herself well. "And what do you do, Emma?" William asked, his tone casual, but with an undertone of challenge. Emma took a deep breath, recalling Mattheo's instructions. "I was between jobs when I met Matteo, but I'm working on plans to start my own business. He's been a great source of encouragement." "Interesting." William tilted his head slightly, weighing her response. At that moment, Matteo smoothly shifted the conversation to his company's future plans. He spoke with such confidence that the group's attention quickly turned to him, allowing Emma a moment of relief. Still, William's calculating expression lingered in her mind. As the evening continued, Emma noticed patterns in the looks and smiles she received. Some were genuine, but many carried judgment or suspicion. Despite her nerves, she forced herself to maintain her composure. At one point, while Matteo was deep in conversation with another businessman, Emma was approached by an elegant woman with a smile that felt more poisonous than friendly. "So, you're Mattheo's fiancée?" the woman asked, extending her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, I'm Emma," she replied, shaking the woman's hand. "I'm Miranda," the woman said, her smile sharpening. "I've worked with Matteo on a few projects in the past." "He never mentioned you before," Miranda added, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Our story is recent but intense," Emma replied, keeping her smile unwavering. Miranda studied her for a moment before letting out a soft chuckle. "I hope you know what you're getting yourself into. Matteo can be complicated." "I enjoy a good challenge," Emma replied firmly, feeling her blood boil, but keeping calm. Miranda looked surprised by the quick response, but before she could continue, Matteo appeared next to Emma, gently placing a hand on her back. "Miranda, I see you've met my fiancé," he said with a polite but slightly tense smile. "Oh, yes, we were just chatting," Miranda replied, before walking off with a wave. Once Miranda was gone, Emma whispered to Matteo, "Who was that?" "Someone who enjoys meddling where she doesn't belong," Matteo replied curtly. Before they could continue, William approached again, this time with a larger group. He seemed more relaxed, but his piercing gaze hadn't softened. "Matthew," William said, glancing pointedly at Emma, "tell me, when's the big day?" "We're planning for next semester," Matthew answered smoothly, without hesitation. "Hope I get an invite," William said, smiling, though his tone hinted at skepticism. Matthew nodded quickly, steering the conversation in another direction. But Emma could sense a shift in the atmosphere. William was testing them, searching for cracks in their story. Later, as the event wound down, Matthew led Emma to a quieter corner of the room. His usual composed demeanor was visibly strained. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, concerned. William's not convinced. "He's suspicious, and that's a problem," Matthew said, scanning the room as if expecting someone to be watching them. "What can we do?" Emma asked, her voice low. Matthew turned to her, his eyes sharp. "We need to figure that out before it's too late." Emma took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "What now?" she asked, her voice calm, but with a hint of concern. Matthew sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "We need to be flawless," he said, his voice low and serious. "William will keep testing us, so you have to be ready for anything." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of his words. This wasn't just a game for Matthew. His company, his future, everything was on the line. And now, so was hers. When the event finally ended, they left together, maintaining their facade until the very last moment. In the car, the tension between them was almost tangible. Matthew stared out the window in silence, while Emma, though exhausted, couldn't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment. She'd made it through without any major mistakes. Finally, Matthew broke the silence. "You did well." Emma turned to him, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you, but I think we still have a lot of work ahead." He nodded, letting out a heavy sigh. "Yes, we do." As the city lights blurred past the car windows, Emma realized this charade was becoming more complicated. It wasn't just about fooling investors or saving Matthew's company anymore. Something deeper was building between them, something neither seemed ready to acknowledge. The next morning, Emma sat in the mansion's garden, trying to collect her thoughts. The previous night had been more of a trial than she'd expected, and though she'd managed to keep up appearances, she knew the danger wasn't over. William Harrow was sharp, and Miranda, with her cutting attitude, seemed like the kind of person who thrived on stirring trouble. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that letting her guard down, even slightly, would lead to disaster. Matthew appeared in the garden shortly after. As always, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, but there was something different about him today. He looked less tense, as though a good night's sleep had eased some of the burdens he carried. Still, the serious expression in his eyes remained. "Are you all right?" he asked, interrupting her thoughts. Trying to appear nonchalant, Emma smiled faintly. "It's not exactly easy, going from pizza delivery girl to Millionaire's fiancée." Matthew sat beside her on the wooden bench, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "You did better than expected. William still has doubts, but that was inevitable. The important thing is he didn't manage to throw us off." "Is that a compliment?" Emma asked, raising an eyebrow. Matthew gave a small smile. "Maybe." Emma laughed softly, but the gravity of the situation quickly returned. "So, what's next?" "We need to strengthen the story," he replied, crossing his arms. "William will keep looking for holes, and Miranda, well, she enjoys meddling. We need to be ready for more questions." "Great," Emma groaned, leaning her head back. "More boot camp with Olivia, I assume." Matthew's brief smile returned before he stood up. "Actually, today we're doing something different." Emma frowned, intrigued. "Different? How?" "We're going out," he said, pulling out his phone to call the driver. "If we want our story to feel real, we need to be seen together outside these formal events." She blinked in surprise. "You mean like a date? Call it that if you want," he replied, a faint hint of irony in his voice. Not long after, they were driving across the city. Emma gazed out the window, trying to guess where Matthew was taking her. He remained quiet for most of the ride, but there was something about his expression that seemed more relaxed than usual. The car finally stopped in front of a large park, surrounded by tall trees and winding walking trails. Emma looked at Matthew, clearly surprised. "A park," she said. "I didn't think this would be your kind of place." "Not everything in my life is about business," he replied, stepping out of the car and opening the door for her. Still curious, Emma followed him as they strolled through the park. She noticed how carefree the people around them seemed, enjoying the sunny day. It was a stark contrast to the tense, calculated world Matthew lived in. "Why here?" she asked, glancing at him. "It's a place where I can disconnect for a while," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "I don't usually bring anyone here, but I thought it might help us reinforce our story." Emma realized that behind Matthew's controlled facade was someone who rarely allowed himself to unwind. As they walked, she began to feel a more genuine connection with him. Like for the first time, he was showing her a truer version of himself. After some time, they sat on a bench near a lake. Emma looked at the water sparkling under the sun before turning to Matthew. "Can I ask you something?" "That depends on the question," he replied with a faint smile. "Why do you do this?" she asked, motioning to their surroundings. "Why go through so much effort to save something that clearly drains you?" Matthew stayed quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much he wanted to share. Finally, he let out a sigh. "My company is all I have. No, it's what keeps me busy. Without it, I don't know who I am." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. There was a sadness in his words she hadn't expected. In that moment, Matthew seemed more human, less like the arrogant millionaire she knew, and more like a man trying to find purpose in his life. "And you?" he asked suddenly, catching her off guard. "Why did you agree to this?" Emma shrugged, turning her gaze back to the lake. "Because I needed the money, and because somehow it felt less unbearable than continuing with a meaningless routine." Matthew studied her for a moment, as if seeing something new in her. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her look away, her face warming. After a while, they decided to head back to the car. The silence between them felt more comfortable now, as if they had reached some kind of mutual understanding. When they arrived at the mansion, the weight of the day's events still lingered, but for a brief moment, Emma felt like she and Matthew had shared something real, something beyond the roles they were playing. Matthew appeared more at ease than Emma had ever seen him. He walked her to the hallway, stopping just before heading upstairs to his office. "Thank you for today," he said sincerely. Emma gave him a small smile, feeling something unexpected stir inside her. "It wasn't so bad." Matthew chuckled softly, the hint of a smile on his face, before he walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway. Emma went up to her room, a swirl of emotions churning inside her. Something was shifting between them, and though she knew it was all part of the act, she couldn't help but wonder if the line between fake and real was beginning to blur. That night, Emma tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the thoughts of Matthew. The walk in the park had shown her a side of him she hadn't expected. He was more than the arrogant man who had hired her for this farce. There were layers to him, complexities she wasn't sure she was ready to understand. But what unsettled her most was how it was affecting her. She had taken this role for the money, to escape her debts, but now she felt herself getting drawn in ways she couldn't control. The next morning, the tension in the mansion was unbearable. Emma could feel the weight of something building in the air, like a storm about to break. As she came downstairs, she found Olivia pacing back and forth, papers in hand, speaking urgently on the phone. The atmosphere was chaotic, and Matthew had locked himself in his office, as he always did when something went wrong. Unable to stand the stifling mood any longer, Emma decided to confront him. She opened the office door without knocking and found him hunched over his desk, eyes focused on a stack of papers. Matthew glanced up briefly before returning to his work as if she wasn't even there. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Emma demanded, crossing her arms. "Not now, Emma," he replied, his eyes never leaving the documents. "Not now," she repeated, irritated. "You're dealing with some crisis. The whole house is in chaos, and no one knows what's going on. If we're pretending to be a couple, at least tell me the truth." Matthew let out an exasperated sigh, tossing his pen onto the desk. He stood up and ran a hand through his hair, clearly at his breaking point. "You want the truth? William Harrow is pressuring me like never before, and now one of the most important investors has pulled out. This could ruin everything. And where do I fit into this?" Emma asked, her heart racing. "I've done everything you asked. I've attended the dinners, pretended to be your fiancée, and now you act like I'm a burden because you don't understand what's at stake." Matthew exploded, his voice echoing in the office. "To you, this is just a job, but to me, it's my entire life falling apart. You think I don't care?" Emma shot back, stepping closer. "I threw myself into a world that isn't mine. I learned to fake it, followed your rules, all because I thought I could help. And now you're treating me like I'm disposable." He shook his head, frustration radiating from him. "This was never about you, Emma. It's about my company. It's about saving everything I've worked so hard to build. Never about me." Emma repeated the words, incredulous. "Never about me? I'm here pretending to be your fiancé, enduring stares, questions, even insults. And you have the nerve to say it's not about me. Because it's not," Matthew yelled, gesturing toward the desk full of documents. "All of this is bigger than you can understand. Bigger than both of us." Emma felt the weight of his words hit her like a punch to the chest. She took a deep breath, trying to control the anger rising inside her. "You're a coward, you know that," she finally said, her voice trembling but full of determination. "You hide behind this excuse of doing everything for work, as if that justifies treating people like disposable tools. Maybe you deserve to lose everything, Matthew, because you don't know how to value what you have." Matthew stepped closer, his face full of frustration. "I never asked you to stay. If you think this is so unbearable, why don't you just leave?" Emma felt the sting of tears, but refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "Maybe that's exactly what I should do," she replied, her voice dangerously calm. "Because clearly you can't see that without people, all this money and power mean nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. Matthew stared at her, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't just anger. It was a mix of pain and regret, emotions he didn't seem to know how to express. But as always, he chose to keep his walls up. "If you want to leave, then go," he said, turning to face the window. "I won't stop you." Emma felt her chest tighten, but she wouldn't drag this out any longer. She turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the mansion's silent hallways. When she reached her room, she began packing her things, her heart heavy with the decision she was making. Olivia appeared at the door, hesitant. "You're really leaving?" she asked softly. "I am," Emma replied without looking back. "There's no point in staying." Olivia sighed, but didn't try to talk her out of it. Emma knew that, deep down, even Olivia understood that things had gone too far. That afternoon, Emma left the mansion, taking the first taxi she could find. As the car pulled away, she looked back one last time at the imposing silhouette of the house that had been her home for such a brief time. Something inside her told her she was leaving more than just a lie behind. Back in her small apartment, Emma tried to pick up her life again. She started working, but nothing felt the same. The days dragged on, and every small moment felt hollow. She found herself thinking about Matteo more than she was willing to admit, wondering if, despite everything, she had left behind something real. Matteo couldn't focus on anything. The negotiations with investors remained tough, and he knew time was running out. But what bothered him most was Emma's absence. The mansion felt bigger and emptier than ever, the silence unbearable. He tried to justify to himself that pushing her away had been the right thing to do, that it was the best way to protect her from the chaos of his world. But the more he tried to convince himself, the emptier he felt. Emma had become more than just a part of his plan. She had become an essential part of his life, and now he didn't know how to fill the space she had left. One night, while in his office, Matteo picked up his phone and stared at the screen. He wanted to call her, but didn't know what to say. Apologies never came easily to him, and the thought of exposing his feelings made him uncomfortable. But deep down, he knew he had to do something. Time dragged on as he debated his next step. Matteo understood that if he stayed on this path, he risked losing not only his company, but also the one person who had managed to break through his walls. He just needed to find the courage to admit it, to her and to himself. The night passed, with Matteo pacing back and forth in his office. He knew he had to act, but every time he thought about reaching out to Emma, a wave of doubt and fear took over. Hesitation wasn't typical for him. Matteo Cruz was known for his determination and control, yet now he felt vulnerable, something he didn't know how to handle. The next morning, with dark circles under his eyes and a more serious expression than usual, Matteo finally made his decision. He got into his car and drove to the address Olivia had given him, not asking too many questions. During the drive, his heart felt heavier with every mile. He didn't know how Emma would react to seeing him, but he knew he couldn't move forward without at least trying. Emma was sitting on her couch with a cup of coffee, trying to organize her thoughts. It had only been a few days since she'd left the mansion, but it felt like an eternity. She was still grappling with why her argument with Matteo had affected her so much. He was stubborn, arrogant, and often insufferable. Yet there was something about him that drew her in, something that made her feel like, in some inexplicable way, he needed her as much as she needed him. The sound of a knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Emma got up slowly, her heart racing, unsure why she felt so nervous. When she opened the door, she found Matteo standing there, his expression a mix of determination and regret. "Matteo, what are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. He took a deep breath, as if summoning all his courage. "We need to talk. Emma, I can't keep going like this." Emma hesitated for a moment, but then opened the door fully, stepping aside to let him in. Matteo glanced around the small apartment, so different from the mansion they were used to, but he wasn't there to judge the space. He was there for her. "Talk," Emma said, crossing her arms and bracing herself for whatever he had to say. Matteo was silent for a few seconds, carefully choosing his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual, almost vulnerable. "I messed up in the office that day. I said things I shouldn't have. I was stressed, under pressure, and I took it out on you." He paused, looking her directly in the eye. "And that was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Emma held his gaze, her face showing little emotion. "So you came here just to apologize?" "No," Matteo shook his head. "I came because I realized you mean more to me than I was willing to admit. Emma, I started this as a contract, a way to save my company, but it turned into something more. You've shown me things about myself I didn't want to see, made me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. I don't know how to be good at this, but I know I don't want to lose you." Mattheo's words hit Emma like a wave. Her heart raced, but at the same time, doubt crept in. She knew Matteo wasn't the type to admit weakness easily. But was he being sincere, or was this just another attempt to maintain control? "Matteo, I need to know," she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Is this real, Or are you here because you think winning me back will help save your company? He took a step closer to her. Emma, I've never been good at trusting people. It's always been easier to keep everything under control. But with you, I can't. You challenge me, break me down, and that terrifies me. But it also makes me want to be better. I'm not here for the business. I'm here because I've realized that without you, everything I've built means nothing. Tears started to well in Emma's eyes, but she blinked quickly, trying to hold them back. Matthew's words felt genuine, and she knew it wasn't easy for him to say them. Even so, she needed to be honest with herself. I've developed feelings for you too, Matthew, she finally admitted, her voice soft, almost a whisper. But I can't be part of your life if this is just another game. I want something real, something beyond contracts and lies. Matthew nodded, his expression serious. I do too. I don't want to pretend anymore. The air between them was thick with the weight of their emotions. Emma didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like they were on the same page. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a lie anymore. Emma, if you'll give me a chance, I want to try for real, Matthew said, his voice steady but filled with hope. I want to prove that we can make this work. Emma studied him for a long moment, trying to gauge the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she stepped closer to him, her voice soft but firm. All right, Matthew, let's try. But I need you to be honest with me, always. I can't do this alone. Matthew's relief was palpable as a faint smile tugged at his lips. I promise, he said, his voice laced with sincerity. They spent the rest of the day talking, sorting through what had gone wrong, and discussing how they could improve. For the first time, Emma felt like she was truly getting to know Matthew, beyond the mask he wore. He was more human than she had imagined, more vulnerable, and it only made her like him more. But as always, their peace was short-lived. Late in the afternoon, Matthew received a call from his team. It was Olivia, and her tone was urgent. Mr. Cruz, William Harrow, made an unexpected move. He's trying to convince other investors to pull out, claiming your relationship with Emma is a sham, Claire explained, her voice tight with worry. Matthew's blood boiled. He's coming at us directly. We won't let this happen. Emma and I will handle this together. Emma, who had been listening to the conversation, looked up at him. Together, she asked, her brow furrowing. Matthew smiled, taking her hand in his. Yes, together. If he wants to test us, we'll show him we're stronger than ever. The office was chaotic as usual. Papers scattered everywhere, phones ringing incessantly, and meetings running long. But now, something was different. Emma was by his side. She sat across from him, reviewing notes and offering suggestions to combat the crisis William had created. Her face was serious, but determination gleamed in her eyes. We need to address this head-on, Emma said, sliding a document across the desk to him. If we let William spread more doubt, it'll only be harder to regain the investors' trust. Matthew nodded, watching her intently. He had always known Emma was smart, but seeing her think under pressure impressed him more than he could have expected. I agree, he said, studying the paper she had handed him. But as you suggested, we need a creative approach. Just responding to the accusations isn't enough. We need to show them something that proves William is wrong. Emma's faint smile was encouraged by his approval. Then why not start by showing how strong your company really is? The numbers, the successful projects, those speak louder than any rumor. Matthew studied her for a moment, admiring her practicality. You're right. We need to turn this into an opportunity. Together, they worked tirelessly, Matthew fine-tuning the technical details, while Emma devised strategies to improve the company's public image. Their dynamic was seamless, efficient, professional, and collaborative. Despite the high stakes, it felt like they were on the right track. Later that night, As Matthew reviewed the final numbers, Emma brought over 2 cups of coffee, setting one down beside him. "You need a break," she said, sitting in a nearby armchair. Matthew looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Since when are you my boss?" "Since I realized you need someone to remind you to take care of yourself," she replied playfully. Matthew let out a short laugh. But there was something deeper in that moment. He leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Thank you, Emma," he said sincerely, "for all of this, for being here. I don't know how I'd be handling this without you." Her face flushed, but she kept her gaze steady. "You'd do the same for me," she replied quietly. The next morning, their plan began to take shape. Matthew called an emergency meeting with key investors, ready to present proof that his company was solid and that William's accusations were baseless. Emma insisted that the event be open to the press, turning what could have been a moment of weakness into an opportunity to display their strength. The conference room was packed when Matthew stepped onto the stage. Dressed impeccably and radiating confidence, he addressed the room with authority. Emma watched from the front row, silently hoping everything would go smoothly. Matthew began his presentation, showcasing the company's impressive numbers, successful projects, and future plans. His voice was steady, clear, and captivating. As he spoke, Emma noticed a shift in him. The man who had once seemed distant and cold now spoke with genuine passion. He seemed more human, more real, and she knew, in some way, she had played a part in that transformation. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Matthew stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by investors and journalists, all praising his transparency and vision. Emma hung back, smiling with pride. But before she could slip away, Matthew found her in the crowd, pulling her close. "Come here," he said, taking her hand. "This is ours. I couldn't have done it without you." Her cheeks flushed as cameras flashed around them, but for the first time, Emma didn't care about the attention. She was exactly where she needed to be. Later that evening, back at the mansion, Matthew seemed more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him. He shrugged off his jacket and tie, tossing them onto the couch before turning to her with a smile. "I think we've finally turned things around," he said, his voice full of relief. "I told you could do it," Emma replied, crossing her arms and smiling back at him. Matthew studied her for a moment, as if trying to commit the moment to memory. Then he stepped closer, taking her hand in his once more. "Emma, I know this is still new for us, but you've changed my life," Matthew said softly, his voice sincere. "It's not just about the company or what we've accomplished together. It's you." Emma felt a lump form in her throat, her eyes welling with tears, but she held his gaze and didn't look away. "You've changed mine too," she whispered. "I never imagined something like this could happen, but here we are." Matthew smiled, pulling her into a warm embrace. In that moment, the world seemed to fade around them. Everything felt exactly as it should. Later that night, as Emma was preparing for bed, there was a soft knock at the door. "Can I come in?" Matthew's voice was gentle. "Of course," she replied, curious. Matthew stepped in, holding a small envelope in his hand. He handed it to Emma, who carefully opened it. Inside was an elegant invitation to an exclusive event at a luxury hotel. But it was the note accompanying the invitation that caught her attention. "Thank you for showing me what truly matters. I want this to be just the beginning of what we can build together, Matthew." Emma looked up, surprised. "What is this?" Matthew stepped closer, a soft smile on his face. "It's an invitation to something special. Something just for us. I want to take you somewhere to celebrate everything we've accomplished. No business, no rivalries, just us." Emma couldn't help but smile. "That sounds perfect." Matthew leaned in for a gentle kiss, sealing the moment. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but with Emma by his side, he felt ready to face them. The night was clear, the stars sparkling overhead, as Emma gazed out the car window. Matthew was driving, but he hadn't revealed their destination yet. He simply said it would be something special. Emma tried to guess, but Matthew remained enigmatic, smiling every time she asked. "You know I hate surprises, right?" Emma teased. "You like this one, I promise," he replied, his eyes focused on the road. With every mile, the mystery deepened. Finally, the car came to a stop in front of a property lit by tiny lights that twinkled like fireflies. Emma stepped out, struck by the sight. It was a beautifully arranged garden with fresh flowers, elegantly set tables, and a candlelit path leading to a small gazebo in the center. "Matthew, what is this?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "A dinner for us," he replied, offering her his arm. "Something special to celebrate everything we've achieved together." Emma's heart raced as he led her to the gazebo. In the center was a perfectly set table with intricate details that made it feel straight out of a fairy tale. The air was filled with the scent of flowers, and soft music played in the background. "You did all this yourself?" Emma asked, amazed. Matthew smiled and pulled out a chair for her. "I had some help, but the idea was mine." "You deserve something special, Emma. Something to show you how much you mean to me." They talked as dinner was served, the food delicious, but Emma hardly noticed the dishes. Her attention was entirely on Matthew, who seemed more relaxed and genuine than ever before. She had never seen him like this, so open, so vulnerable. "You know, when I first met you, I never imagined we'd end up here," she said with a smile. "Neither did I," Matthew replied, his eyes sparkling. "But I think that's what makes it so special. It was unexpected, but it's real." Emma felt her cheeks flush. She knew Matthew struggled to express his emotions, and that made his words even more meaningful. Reaching across the table, she took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. After dinner, Matthew invited her to take a walk in the garden. The lights along the path created a magical atmosphere, and Emma felt as if she were walking in a dream. They strolled in silence until they reached a small pond, surrounded by softly lit trees. Matthew stopped and turned to face her, looking nervous, something Emma rarely saw in him. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concerned. He took a deep breath, pulled something out of his pocket, and opened his hand. Emma's heart raced as she saw a small velvet box. "Emma," Matthew said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "from the moment you came into my life, everything changed. You made me see what truly matters. You challenged me to be better and showed me what it means to love. I know I'm not perfect, but with you I feel like I can face anything." He knelt down, opening the box to reveal a stunning ring. "Emma, will you marry me?" For a moment, she was speechless, tears streaming down her face. Then she nodded vigorously. "Yes, Matthew. Yes, I'll marry you." Matthew smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger before standing and pulling her into a tight embrace. In that moment, the world faded away as her heart swelled with happiness. After the proposal, Matthew led her back to the gazebo, where a small surprise awaited them. Olivia and a few of Matthew's closest friends were there, smiling and clapping as they entered. Emma realized Matthew had planned every detail to make the moment unforgettable. "I wanted to celebrate this with the people who matter to us," Matthew explained, squeezing her hand. Emma smiled, feeling happier than she ever thought possible. They toasted to the new chapter they were beginning, and for the first time, Emma felt like she had truly found her place. Later that night, after everyone had left, Matthew and Emma were alone again, sitting under the starry sky. They talked about their dreams and plans for the future. Matthew shared his vision for expanding his company while maintaining a better work-life balance. Emma, in turn, spoke about her idea of starting a small business of her own, something that truly excited her. "I want you to know," Matthew said, squeezing her hand, I'll support you in everything. Emma, your dreams are just as important as mine, Matteo said, holding her hand, his voice sincere. Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. She knew that together they could build something extraordinary, something far beyond money or success. That night, as they returned home, Emma felt completely fulfilled. All the struggles, all the challenges they had faced, suddenly seemed worth it. She watched Matteo as he prepared for bed, her heart swelling with love for him. He turned to her and smiled. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied, her voice soft. "Just thinking about how love can change everything." "Everything? Even the most unlikely people," he teased. Matteo laughed and pulled her closer. "I guess we're proof of that." They fell asleep in each other's arms, ready to embark on a new journey together, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. The days following the proposal felt like a dream. The announcement of their engagement was met with excitement from close friends and Matteo's team, and the couple began planning the details of their wedding. Life seemed to finally settle into a peaceful rhythm, but as Emma knew all too well, peace rarely lasted forever. It all began with an unexpected call. Matteo was in an important meeting when Olivia appeared at the door, her face more serious than usual. He immediately sensed something was wrong and quickly ended the meeting, following her to his office. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door behind him. Olivia placed a tablet on the desk and showed him an anonymous email that had just arrived. The content was threatening, claiming to have evidence that could ruin Matteo's reputation and questioning the authenticity of his relationship with Emma. "This is William again," Matteo said, his voice filled with anger. "He couldn't take me down publicly, so now he's trying to sabotage our personal happiness. What are we going to do?" Olivia asked, clearly concerned. Matteo took a deep breath, trying to control his frustration. "We'll get ahead of it. I want you to gather all the information you can about this so-called evidence. We'll dismantle this threat before it gains any traction." Later, when Matteo returned home, he found Emma in the living room, laughing as she flipped through wedding decor catalogs. For a moment, his tension eased at the sight of her, but the weight of the situation quickly returned. He knew he had to tell her. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, sitting beside her. She noticed the seriousness in his tone and set the catalog aside. "What happened?" Matteo explained the email and William's potential intentions. She listened carefully, her smile fading as he spoke. "He won't stop, will he?" she asked, shaking her head. "It feels like no matter what we do, he always finds a way to attack." "He's desperate," Matteo replied. "He knows he's lost in business, so now he's targeting us personally. But I promise you, Emma, I won't let him hurt us." She placed her hand over his, squeezing it gently. "We're in this together, Matteo. He can't beat us if we stand united." The next morning, Matteo and Emma met with Olivia's team to discuss the situation. The investigators they had hired discovered that William was trying to bribe former employees of Matteo's to fabricate false stories about him and Emma. One ex-employee had even recorded a video claiming their relationship was a staged arrangement from the start. "This is ridiculous," Emma said, crossing her arms. "Who would believe something so absurd?" "Unfortunately, some people might," Matteo replied, scanning the documents in front of him. "Especially if William manages to plant these stories in the right places." "So what can we do?" she asked. Matteo leaned forward, his expression serious. "We're going to expose William before he has a chance to launch his attack. I want Olivia to organize a press conference. We'll present the evidence we have against him and show everyone who he really is." Emma nodded, but an uneasy feeling grew inside her. While she trusted Matteo and his ability to handle crises, she knew this fight was deeply personal. William wasn't just attacking their business. He was going after the truth of what they had built together. In the days that followed, preparations for the press conference were intense. Matthew gathered his team, while Emma helped with the details, ensuring everything was perfectly aligned. She understood that this was a pivotal moment, and there was no room for mistakes. Finally, the day arrived. The room was packed with journalists, all eager to hear what Matthew Cruz had to say. He stepped onto the stage with Emma by his side, both exuding confidence. Matthew began speaking, addressing the recent attacks and unveiling evidence that linked William to the attempts to sabotage his company and personal life. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and approached the microphone. She knew her words could make all the difference. "When I met Matthew," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I had no idea how much my life would change. Our relationship may have started in a way that seems unlikely, but what we've built together is real. We've faced challenges that could have broken us, but they've only made us stronger." She looked at Matthew, who gave her an encouraging smile, before she continued, "I know some people want to question the truth about us, but all I can say is this. There's no lie here. What we have is love, and that's something no one can destroy." The room was silent for a moment before it erupted in applause. Matthew and Emma walked off the stage hand in hand, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally starting to lift. Later that night, as they sat on the mansion's porch, Matthew looked at Emma with a contented smile. "You were amazing today," he said, holding her hand. "We were," she corrected with a smile. "But I think we can finally catch our breath now, don't you?" Matthew nodded, though there was a glimmer in his eyes that suggested he was still planning something. "There's one more thing I want to do," he said, pulling something from his pocket. Emma watched with curiosity as he handed her a small envelope. She opened it to find a note that read, "Get ready. Tomorrow will be unforgettable." "What does this mean?" she asked, laughing. Matthew just smiled mysteriously. "You'll have to wait and see." That night, as Emma slept peacefully, Matthew watched her with a mixture of love and gratitude. He knew that with her by his side, he could face anything. Tomorrow marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter he couldn't wait to start. The sun had barely risen when Emma woke to the gentle breeze coming through the open window. Matthew was already out of bed, leaving behind a note on her pillow that read, "Today will be unforgettable." Smiling, she wondered what he was planning this time. Ever since they met, he had a way of turning ordinary moments into something extraordinary. When she made her way downstairs, Olivia was waiting with an excited expression and a soft-colored dress in hand. "Mr. Cruz asked me to help you get ready," Olivia said with a twinkle in her eye. "He's preparing something very special." "This is becoming a habit," Emma joked as she took the dress, but she couldn't deny how surprising it all was. Once she was dressed, Emma was escorted to a car waiting at the mansion's entrance. She had no idea where she was going, and the driver remained silent, keeping the suspense alive. When the car finally stopped, Emma stepped out and saw Matthew standing in the distance, near what looked like a small, private garden. The space was adorned with fresh flowers, wooden arches draped in ivy, and cozy benches surrounding a simple yet elegant altar. Only a few close friends and family were present. Emma stood frozen, her heart racing as she realized what was happening. Matthew walked up to her and gently took her hand, a soft smile on his face. He seemed calmer than ever, as if this moment was the culmination of everything they had been through. "What is this?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Our wedding," Matthew replied, his voice filled with emotion. "I realized I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to put off what we have for another day. This is the beginning of our future, and I can't think of anything more important." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked at him. "You're impossible," she said, laughing softly. "And you love that about me," he teased, his voice gentle. They walked together to the altar, where an officiant stood ready to make their union official. The ceremony was simple, but every word spoken carried deep meaning. When it was time for their vows, Matthew held Emma's hands tightly, looking directly into her eyes. "Emma, you came into my life like a storm. You changed everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about life. Today, I promise to be the man you deserve, every single day. I want this to be just the beginning of a story we'll build together, side by side." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she shared her own vows. "Matthew, you showed me that love can come in the most unexpected ways. You challenged me, supported me, and made me see my own worth. Today, I promise to stand by you in every step, every success, and every struggle, because with you, everything is worth it." Their heartfelt I do's were followed by a warm kiss, drawing applause and laughter from their guests. The rest of the day was filled with joy, music, and lively conversation. Emma couldn't stop smiling as she looked at Matthew. Everything they had endured had led them to this moment, and she knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Later, away from the celebration, the couple walked hand in hand through the garden, enjoying the quiet of the night. Emma glanced at Matthew, feeling her heart swell with contentment. "I don't think I've ever been this happy," she said. "This is just the beginning," Matthew replied, pulling her closer. "With you by my side, there's nothing I can't face." They stopped under a tree, and Matthew looked up at the starry sky before turning to her again. "Emma, there's something I want you to know," he began, his voice soft but full of depth. "Everything we've been through, every challenge, everything we've built together, it was you who made it all possible. You didn't just save me, you transformed me. I'm a better man because of you." Emma felt her chest tighten at the intensity of his words. "Matthew, I've changed because of you too. You've shown me that true love exists, even when it comes from the most unexpected places." They stood there for a long time, simply enjoying each other's presence. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the love they shared. They knew there would still be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together. From that day forward, Matthew and Emma began a new chapter in their lives, one filled with hope, shared dreams, and a love that had overcome every obstacle.